what is quantum computing? What do you think? What is it?
A new type of computer, slightly different physics, and the underlying math is more general than you'd get in a standard computer. Chinese Communist Party have shown that they're not particularly respectful of.
Now let's move towards blockchain as well, because we everyone know blockchain has one of the biggest threat, which is quantum computers, because blockchain completely works on the cryptographics and the certain hashing mechanism. How can we secure this blockchain, or is this blockchain completely breakable once we are ready with the quantum computers or post computing?
Blockchain, it's called Curanium, and they've started recently, and they've actually built in post-quantum cryptography from the outset.
What are the parameters actually we can take as a in general, not as a very high level? Any parameters which can be considered as a developer point of view or as an entrepreneur who have their businesses around up and running on cloud? What are the generic threats for them, and what should they do to secure their infra? India and Pakistan has a very short mini war kind of situation over there, and they had some conflict, right? So do you feel like once the country has developed these quantum computers, so they can use this to attack or do the cyber attack sort of thing? So what's your thought in that angle? Hey, hello guys. Thank you so much for coming to on my YouTube channel. So here we have a very special guest, Michael. Hey, hi Michael. How are you?
I'm well, thank you, Akshay. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. Thank you so much for giving your precious time. And today we're gonna talk more on quantum computing and cybersecurity stuff. So it's like very exciting stuff, the future tech we are talking after so long time. Uh, I always have a passion and the curiosity to know more about the quantum computer, what is happening under the hood, and what is the future use case for it, right? We know there are very few on the very high level things. It is like this and that, but the Michael is an expert and he is working and he has his own company which is doing a lot of stuff on the quantum computing side. So we'd love to know a lot about what is it, how it works, and where exactly we can use it. So over to you, Michael, for your introduction first.
Okay, thank you. So my name's Michael Walker. I now run a company called Shrocat Security, where I help companies deal with the post-quantum cryptography issue, and I'll get into more of that in a moment. But basically, when quantum computers start getting useful, they're also going to start getting dangerous in the sense that they'll be able to break a lot of modern cryptography, which currently is secure. Before I was doing that, I actually used to work for a quantum computing company as a quantum applications developer, and that's essentially how I came to understand about quantum algorithms and the threat that quantum computers do pose to our current encryption if we don't take action.
Okay. So so can you tell more about your like from how long you are doing into this quantum computing space, or what's your previous background? Something on your education side. So
Sure.
these developers might get excited with respect to your background. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I began with a PhD in theoretical physics. That was quite some time ago now, and I was interested in the time in particle physics and using mathematics to try and understand things like the lowest energy state of quantum chromodynamics. So trying to understand how quarks were confined inside of hadrons and neutrons and protons. And that was it was the heady days. That was interesting stuff.
Yeah. Yes.
And then there weren't a lot of funding opportunities back then, so I ended up moving through various computer modeling positions. I won't list them all in detail, but probably of note was I went to do an MPhil in bioinformatics, and that's where I got to learn a lot of statistics, a bit of machine learning, some data science, and those are useful things to know, even though I don't use them directly at the moment.
Amazing, man. Sorry. Go ahead. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead. You did already very fascinating stuff.
Thank you. So I was brought to Sydney by a position at the University of New South Wales, where I was modelling the spread of sexually transmitted diseases, and that was interesting work that actually went into informing government policy. So I was proud of that. When I was
Mm.
there, I met someone who was making his own way into quantum computing, and he actually
Mm.
found a job with a quantum computing company, or the same one, shortly before I had to leave UNSW. At the time, I
Mm.
was trying to get into epidemiology as a career. I thought that would be something secure. And actually, that was interrupted and there was no funding because of COVID. So I actually lost my career
Oh.
in epidemiology because of an epidemic, which I've always found somewhat ironic, but life's like that.
Mm.
But it was actually a good thing in the end because the job that I had in quantum computing was really interesting. It's a fascinating field, and the challenges that I had to take on were really good to do. And I like the people I was working with as well. So that turned out to be a
Amazing.
blessing in disguise uh, in the end.
Great, great. You have a very fantastic and exciting background. We'll talk more on this later.
Hmm.
We might do a separate podcast for that, but let's jump to the our quantum computing side, right?
Yeah.
So, very first, let's try to understand what is quantum computing. What do you think? What it is? Yeah.
Okay, so quantum computers are basically a new type of computer. They work on slightly different physics, and the underlying math is more general than you'd get in a standard computer. And
Mm.
that allows them to represent data in a higher dimensional way, in a more general sort of a way. And the operations that you can perform in a standard computer, you can essentially do in a quantum computer as well. But the quantum computer, again, it's more generalized. So there are operations that the quantum computer will do that you can't do classically. And what that means in
Mm.
practice is that the quantum computer can then run algorithms and take paths through parameter space, if you like, that a standard computer can't follow. And that means that they
Okay.
can sort of take shortcuts, in a loose way of speaking. But that's the way I think of it. And some of those shortcuts are useful. And because we have these useful shortcuts in quantum computing, they'll be able to solve certain problems very well that we can't solve very well at the moment. And I'm sure we'll find
Mm.
other use cases as well. The one that got everything going, the one that everybody's heard about, is finding prime factors for large numbers. That's called
Mhm.
Shor's algorithm, will do that. And it it's able to do that because it's able to perform operations that are not available to a standard computer. And then we can use
Mm.
that output from that algorithm and then use it to find the prime factors of a large number. So that is an operation which scales exponentially for a standard computer, but on a quantum computer,
Mhm.
it scales linearly. So that's one example. Now, not everything is an exponential improvement. Unfortunately,
Mm.
most are only polynomial or even just quadratic improvements, but it's still enough to be useful if you can choose your application wisely.
Okay. Okay. Great. Great. So simply it gonna do a complex task in a very fast manner and in a very uh, I think whatever the task we are performing, it will happen in a very parallel execution sort of things.
For a lot of problems, yes. Certainly,
Oh,
if
okay.
you're looking at an optimization problem, that is
Hmm.
a reasonable way to characterize it. It's certainly not precise. Uh,
Okay.
and there are a lot of algorithms where I wouldn't characterize it that way, but
Ah,
but certainly a lot you do, and the optimization algorithms are certainly ones that I would characterize in that
okay.
way. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Got it. So, just a curious question: where we are, like, where is the world in terms of developing the quantum computers? Like, is it fully ready to use, or are we in a development phase? So, what is the current status around it?
We're still, I think, in the development stage. Uh, some companies, very large companies, have bought their own quantum computers, but even
Hmm.
they're really just doing that so that they can get familiar with the technology and so that they can be at the cutting edge. There's this
Right.
great fear of missing out, and I think that's probably a healthy thing for the field. And if you've got the money, that's not a bad thing to have either. I don't think
Hmm.
anyone's really doing anything with it yet where we're saying, oh, yes, we saved millions of dollars because we
Hmm.
used a quantum computer to solve this problem. The
Ah.
technology isn't quite there yet. Um,
Hmm.
so
Okay.
we will be expecting breakthroughs, I think, in the next 5, 10 years.
Okay.
One thing you
Amazing.
can do is
Hmm.
some companies that have made quantum computers, they make them available on the cloud. and
Okay.
you can get a free public license, or you can pay for a sort of a premium license and get better access then. And then you can actually test out your own algorithms and get familiar with it,
Mm-hmm.
see how noise affects your outputs. Uh,
Ah,
but people are doing that. It is starting to happen,
okay.
but it's still at the developmental stage.
Amazing. Amazing.
Hmm.
So, I would like to know one more thing. Uh, Globally, like many countries are running behind it, and many governments are funding their they are doing multiple initiatives to make a supercomputer or to get a quantum computer ready for their own purposes. So, what do you think? Which country is much ahead in this race, or what's your observations inside that? Which
Uh,
country is in the front footer? Yeah.
yeah, that can be very difficult to be definitive on. Um,
Okay.
I'm happy to say that it is a reasonably collaborative sort of a field, at least in the West.
Mm-hmm.
I think America is investing a lot of money. Australia, despite its relatively small size, is actually
Oh,
at the front. We don't lead, but we are at the front. We do a lot of good work here,
amazing,
um,
amazing.
and there's a lot of good work going on in Europe. I don't think there's any one country where I could say that country's in front.
Uh-huh.
But
Okay. So some parallel work is going on. Each country is putting their effort from their side.
yes,
You can say like
and because a
okay.
lot of the
So
development still is at the scientific level, it's still reasonably
mm,
collaborative. Another thing too is that when companies or labs do make a breakthrough and make progress, they want people to know
mm,
because they want the prestige, they want the funding is the main thing. They certainly need
mm,
to maintain the interest, the public interest, and the government interest. So it's important if
ah,
you do make progress that you let people know about it. Um,
right, right.
China, China's a little more secretive.
Mm,
They like to make big claims. We do know that they're investing a lot of money, arguably
mm,
the most. I don't
okay.
know how much of that's quantum computing and how much of that are things like quantum cryptography and uh, yeah, quantum key distributions and things like that. So maybe not the
Uh-huh.
quantum computer per se, but we do need to keep an eye on them as well. They're doing some very heavy investing.
Yeah. So I was about to ask this question, where exactly China stand in this race, and do you really feel that if China is the first person to crack it in a very world state, would it be a threat for global for other competitors? What's your thought on this?
I think that would be a concern. The Chinese
Hmm.
Communist Party have shown that they're not particularly respectful of boundaries or privacy. So that would be a concern. There have been recorded instances of internet traffic being mysteriously rerouted through China, and I'll say more about that later if we get to harvest now, decrypt later attacks. Uh, but yes, that would be something that you don't want a state that you're not necessarily getting along well with to have when you don't have it.
Right, right, right. Okay, got it. So now I would like to know what are the threats do you feel like? What are the threats of quantum computing we have?
Right. So the biggest concern is that some of
Hmm.
our major, most commonly used encryption that we use nowadays, especially public key encryption, that
Public key
encryption
encryption,
can be
yeah.
broken if you know how to factorize a large number efficiently.
Hmm.
So essentially,
Hmm.
the mathematics of it, and I don't really want to go into a lot of technicalities on it, but the math
Hmm.
is basically based on the difficulty of breaking a large number into its prime factors.
Right.
And now, if you have, you can verify the prime factors easily enough, but to actually find them
Hmm.
in the first place can be
Hmm.
is computationally very difficult, and that's what our
Okay.
public key encryption is based on. But because
Correct.
of Shor's algorithm, which is this algorithm that can be used to find the prime factors of a large number, that will no longer
Hmm.
be a difficult task, and it won't be a simple matter of using bigger keys from now on. So at the
Hmm.
moment, you can do that. So we've had to double our key size a few times because computers got more powerful. But the growth in the computational complexity when you do that is
Hmm.
exponential. So, however complicated it is, it's how
Hmm.
much more how rapidly it gets more complicated is proportional to that. So it's a bit like when you're growing bacteria in a dish. You start with one, it becomes two, becomes four. And so even though you've only got a fairly slow growth at the start, it quickly becomes a much rapid rate of growth because the rate of growth grows with how much you have already. And that's what happens with the complexity of factoring primes if you're doing it with a standard algorithm. But because Shor's algorithm allows you to do this in a way that scales linearly with the size
Mm-hmm.
of your key, then it's you don't get that same degree of security. And so that is the main reason why we need to start looking at things like post quantum cryptography.
Post quantum cryptography. Yeah, yeah, got it. So, in general, what I understood, like, it is easy to break our public encryption, you mean to say, whatever the public key cryptographic we use nowadays. When quantum computer will be ready, it is very easy to break that encryption sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
We can replicate public key and private key of it.
Okay. Private keys are not so vulnerable. The
Mm-hmm.
reason is that they're not based on that same prime number mathematics that's based on. They
Huh.
can be broken with I guess you could say, a brute force attack. And there is
Huh.
a quantum computing algorithm called Grover's algorithm, which can do that
Huh.
more efficiently. So it has what we say a quadratic advantage, uh,
Okay.
but it's not the same level of degree. It's not the exponential advantage that Shor's algorithm
Mm-hmm.
has over classical methods. The fact that it's quadratic basically means you can offset it just by making your key twice as big.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't be complacent. We can't ignore it, but it's not the major concern that public key encryption is. There are other complications too, which I might get to later, uh, but the public key encryption is the main concern that we need to pay attention to.
Public key encryption. Okay, okay. And as you just mentioned, the post-compute encryption will come into the picture, cryptographic will come into the picture. So what are those post-compute cryptographic methods or the precautions we can take?
Right. So this problem has been on the radar for a while, thankfully,
Hmm.
and the National Institute of Standards and Technology in the US basically had a program. You could call it a competition even, where people could submit their encryption standards which were resistant to quantum methods or to any known quantum
Ah,
algorithm anyway. And of course, they have to be resistant to classical methods as well. And they
hmm.
were accepted around about 2016 and tested very thoroughly. And a few of them had lasted a few years. One was broken only in 2022, but there have
Okay.
been a few now that have actually survived. And so it's believed that they are actually secure, at least for the foreseeable future.
Okay.
So the ones for replacing public key encryption, there is what we call MLChem, module lattice key encapsulation
Hmm.
mechanism. So module lattice refers to the mathematics that this encryption method is based on. So it's
Hmm.
not based on the difficulty of finding a prime. It's based on the difficulty of finding the vectors that generate a lattice. So you could think of a lattice like just a array of dots in rows and columns, and you can generate that with one vector that points to the right and one vector that points up and down. And by
Yeah.
taking all those linear combinations, you can get that lattice. Now, for that particular lattice that I've described, finding those two vectors is pretty obvious. That's pretty easy. But you can make it so they're not at right angles. So you get a slightly more complicated lattice. You can make it so that they're not the same length, and that
Hmm.
complicates it even further. What makes it really complicated is that you do that, plus you do it in higher dimensions. So it's not a two-dimensional lattice. The standard being used now for MLChem is a 200-dimensional lattice, and the
Okay.
computational complexity needed to break that is extremely high.
Hmm. Right.
So that's the mathematical problem that's based on, and so that's the key encapsulation mechanism. And there's also MLDSA, which is module lattice digital signing algorithm.
Module and digital signing algorithm. Okay.
Right.
Hmm.
So that's for a digital signature. So when you look at
Hmm.
a website, when you're browsing the web,
Hmm.
your browser will say, "Show me your signature," and
Right. SSL sort of SSL encryption sort of thing, where we sign the certificate, right? Digital signature stuff.
That's right, and that's basically conventionally
Mm,
that's currently based on public key encryption. They've sort of put a bit of a
mm,
tweak on it. Um, but as I said, that'll be breakable once we get quantum computers. But
mm.
the module lattice one works again. It's on different math, but it performs the same function. We can sign. You can sign your website, or you can sign your document, or your file, whatever, and that can be verified that that was from you, and it's not someone pretending to
Okay.
be you.
Mm,
The other nice thing about that is it also means that you can't say later, "Oh no, that wasn't me. I didn't do that," because they can say, "Well, that's your digital signature. It must have been you," because no one could have faked that. So it has that dual use. So yeah, those are the first two, and then there's another method. It's called the stateless hash-based encryption, and that is based on a hash rather than on module lattices. But again, it's the
mm.
same thing. It allows for that sharing of information and encryption and decryption in a secure way.
Okay. Amazing. So uh, there are multiple such algorithms which can uh, written in a different way, which will protect the standard, whatever we say, the already existing infra we have. We can make it safe with respect to these algorithms, right?
Well, you can hybridize it, for example. So you may have
Uh-huh.
something with standard encryption, and you can put the quantum resistant encryption on top of that.
Hmm.
And that is sometimes recommended because uh, even though these post quantum encryption methods have been tested quite thoroughly,
Hmm.
it's only been over a period of 8 years, whereas our conventional um, cryptography has been tested over a few decades. So RSA
Okay.
encryption or secure hash algorithms, we've had to beef up the key size a few times because of greater computational power, but the
Hmm.
algorithms themselves are not breakable, and we've got a long experience to be confident of that. Whereas the quantum post
Uh-huh.
quantum ones, we're pretty confident, but it's not to the same extent.
Okay.
I should probably mention as well the
Uh,
algorithms that I encryptions that I just described. They're the ones
uh,
that have had standards released for them. So the NIST
okay.
have released standards August of last year, and they said, okay, these ones I believed we're quite sure are safe. The standard is that you will use a key size of such and such and
Hmm.
implement this algorithm, and that will be our standard. There are other ones which are expected to have standards released for them soon. So there's Falcon
Uh-huh.
and another one called Hamming quasi-cyclic algorithm. So these are backups in case the ones that we have
Okay.
standards for do actually get broken.
Uh-huh. Okay, okay. So there are certain list of algorithms already which are is categorized as a safe as of now. It is secure, it is good to go.
Yeah,
And there are certain more algorithms in a roadmap. Like this could be a another backup of it. If this will, then for sure this will work, sort of things.
yeah.
Amazing.
Hmm.
Yeah. So for sure, I'll personally try to dig into these all those algorithms and look how can we use these in other way or in blockchain way because I do more in the blockchain work. So now let's move towards blockchain as well because we everyone know uh, blockchain has one of the biggest threat which is quantum computers because blockchain completely works on the cryptographics and the certain hashing mechanisms, right? And the proof mechanism altogether, right? So, what do you think? Where, how can we secure this blockchain, or is this blockchain completely breakable once we are ready with the quantum computers or post computing? What's your thought?
Yeah. So once the quantum computers get big enough to be a threat to encryption, so we say
Mm,
cryptographically relevant quantum computers, once that comes along, uh,
mm,
then you will need to have upgraded to a post quantum encryption method. Now,
mm.
from what I understand, blockchain uses mainly hashing to basically link your blocks together, and it
Right.
uses public key encryption to actually encrypt the content within the blocks. So, as I've said, the public key encryption is your biggest weakness there.
Yeah.
So that's the
Got
one
it.
that Shor's algorithm is just going to rip through.
Mm,
So yeah, so so your cryptocurrencies or blockchain generally will need to have find some way to will need to have to find a path to take it from the encryption it's using now to the post quantum encryption that it needs.
mm,
And this is true of anything really. Well, what I actually do at Shrocat Security is help companies find a roadmap so that they can
mm,
take themselves from where they are at the moment, secure their data against
uh-huh.
harvest now, decrypt later, which I'll get to in a moment, and also then make their own systems post quantum secure and all
Uh-huh.
their future transmissions uh, are quantum secure. So this is certainly a difficult thing, I think, for blockchain because it's very decentralized by construction. In fact, that's what you like about it. But that does mean
Right.
that you're going to have to do something clever to
Mm,
to actually get yourself into a quantum safe state. So
right.
I went to went to like a panel discussion recently. It was on the web, but
Uh-huh.
and the
Okay.
consensus out of that seemed to be that some cryptocurrencies they'll focus on cryptocurrencies, but a blockchain generally, some I imagine will make that transition safely and survive,
Mm,
and some will not. And if you want your
okay.
particular blockchain method or application to make it through, you need to start now because it's difficult and it takes time and there's a lot of testing involved.
Correct.
And certainly, if there's currency involved, cryptocurrency involved, you would want people to really be comfortable and to feel secure.
Right.
I'm aware of one um, blockchain. It's called Curanium, and they've started recently,
Uh-huh.
and they've actually built in post quantum cryptography from the outset.
Oh, nice.
So
That's great.
yeah, so that's good for them. But the existing ones will need to find a way to make that path. So the main one, as I've said, is the public key encryption that's actually inside your blocks. That's got your actual information. Um,
Mm,
then there's the hash, which is chaining your blocks together. That
right.
quantum computers do have a quadratic advantage with that. As I've mentioned, you'll need to make your key bigger as a protection.
Right.
Experts in this field are not terribly worried, partly because you just make the key bigger, but also the algorithm that does that is called Grover's algorithm. And if you're doing
Mm,
something or you're doing something which is computationally complex, that can actually be quite difficult to implement.
correct.
Yeah, it can have a very high gate depth, so
Right.
it's not an easy one to do.
So in developer point of view, it will be a little big headache to implement all this tricky stuff or complex algorithms in the blockchain stuff. So it needs to be seamless as well. You have to make sure that I'm
Yes.
making that secure. Hmm. Right, right. So let me just revise. There are a few parameters we need to consider while doing or making secure the blockchain. So first one is that the public key encryption, we have to make sure that we use the quantum proof encryption over here.
Hmm.
And the hashing mechanisms, whatever the hash we linked, like one block with other, we have to make sure that it's a properly and non-breakable one. And the second part, what was the third part? I missed out.
No, it was really just those two. So
Okay, these
I'll go
two.
to you
Okay.
to.
And is there, yeah, is there any challenge into the consensus mechanism, like calculating the nonce or and all those things will be the challenge
So some of the
for
challenges you would
post
have
encrypt?
with that upgrade is that
Mhm.
these new algorithms, encryptions, they are more complex computationally, and that can have a
Ah,
deleterious effect on your performance, depending on how it's
oh,
done. Um, with blockchain, I think you also want to keep your key sizes smaller than for most security operations,
mhm.
so that might require you to be a bit more clever as well. And I
Correct.
don't have the answers on how you'd go about solving that, but that is a challenge that you need to rise to.
Okay. Cool, cool, cool. Yes, for sure. Might be some of the great minds from US space might be already doing some research on this, and might be few years we can get a solution. And of course, we'll encourage all the developers and the cryptographers who are doing something around this blockchain space. They should look into these factors, whatever Michael just mentioned.
Yeah.
It's a very pretty important one.
Hmm.
Thanks for that, Michael. And now let's move to our next question. So, what do you think? Like, let's say to be a post-computing secure, what are the parameters as we can take as a in general, not as a very high level, any parameters which can be considered as a developer point of view or as an entrepreneur who are have their businesses around up and running on cloud. What are the generic threats for them, and what should they do to secure their infra or their development activity?
Uh, so the most immediate problem that most businesses,
Mm,
especially if you're handling a lot of very sensitive data, um, you need to secure that data against being hacked into in the future. So this is
okay.
something that we refer to as harvest now, decrypt later, or sometimes store now,
Hmm.
decrypt later. And if you transmit your data over the internet and you've got it encrypted, and no one can read it except the people you want to send it to.
Hmm.
Pardon me, but it can be intercepted and copied and stored, and
Right.
people can basically store data that they've intercepted on the internet, and then when they manage to get access to a cryptographically
Hmm.
relevant quantum computer, then they can go through and decrypt it. And if that
Okay.
data is something that's very sensitive, like it's IP or somebody's legal
Hmm.
sensitive data, medical data, genetics, uh, that
Right.
could that could actually be disastrous for the person whose data that was, or for the company that
Hmm.
didn't have it protected. So what I do with my clients is I advise them, what data do you have that's going to be still sensitive beyond the next five
Hmm.
years?
Hmm.
Okay, next week's agenda, or the agenda for next week's company meeting is probably fine, but your
Uh-huh.
IP or that sensitive legal document you're working on, that's something you want to protect when you're sending it over. So
Correct.
that getting those files and getting that data encrypted with a post quantum encryption method uh,
Hmm.
being transmitted, that needs to be taken care of very quickly.
Okay.
So
So,
do
so
that fast. Sorry.
yeah. So, what I understood, like whatever data we have as of now, so many people used to simply do the normal encryption and put that data on cloud. But you are saying just don't do the normal encryption, just do the post cryptographic computing proper encryption, which is a very sensitive data. It might be your IP, legal, or just change the encryption way, then only host it on cloud. Got it. Yeah.
Yeah, and not
Right.
just posting it on the cloud either. Even if you're well, we shouldn't be emailing sensitive data anyway. But if you file transfer
Oh.
it, transfer it by whatever protocol you're using, it needs to have
Mm-hmm.
a post quantum encryption on it.
Okay, okay. Not just cloud, but whatever data wherever you are dealing in the internet, it should be properly encrypted one,
Yeah,
post-computing
I mean,
encryption.
it does
Okay.
depend on how long it's sensitive for.
Hmm.
So some documents that they need to keep that private, until someone dies or for the next 40, 50 years.
Ah,
That data you need
all right.
post quantum encrypted as soon as possible. If it's things that won't matter in
Hmm.
2 weeks' time, well, that's not so urgent.
Ah, yeah. It's depend on time period, how long you want that data to be get secured.
That's right.
Depending on that, yeah, depending on time, you have to take a decision to make it quantum secure or not.
Hmm.
Hmm. Cool, cool.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's the first thing. So that's what I focus on.
Hmm.
Once
Yeah.
that's done, you can look at making your organization quantum secure going forward. So the first
Okay.
thing that companies need to do is identify all the encryption processes that are actually happening on their systems. And
Okay.
the thing is that people are often just using the default that came with their operating system. They've added stuff on,
Hmm.
they've built things up over time, and it hasn't been the need, and certainly not the drive, to actually keep track of what encryptions are used where. So there are
Hmm.
tools out there now that can help you build up what they call a cryptographic bill of materials. So you you then have this list, and you can say, okay, well, I'm using public key encryption for that one. I'm symmetric key is this one, and a hash for that one.
Hmm.
And you know all the
Hmm.
processes that are going on. And then once you've got that list, you can then swap out. Ideally, you'd swap out your public key
Hmm.
for something that is quantum safe. Um, in practice, it might be a little bit harder than that, but you might decide, okay, I'll operate. I'll upgrade my operating system. I'll activate these options that I wasn't using before, and I'll come up with some sort of path so that I can
Hmm.
take myself from my standard setup now to something that is quantum secure and get there in a reasonably short amount of time. But it's not urgent. It's not falling over yourself. Get it done next week because we've already secured that data that's long term sensitive. Um, now, the other thing was so you might decide to replace certain applications with other ones that are quantum secure or whatever, but it depends on the individual setup. If your business is based in the cloud, if you're using a cloud service to
Hmm.
handle your computing, a lot of the major players now have actually got some good post quantum encryptions available. And so you just need to know what they are and make sure that you've activated those options as things that you want to do. But it's not just you, it's also the people that you work with and
Hmm.
business partners you have, because if you're sending it in a post quantum encryption, then they need to have post quantum encryption as well so that they can read it.
Hmm.
So
Right.
there's just a bit of company wide coordination that needs to go along with that. Um, the other thing
Okay.
is that because a lot of these new encryptions are, well, new, I mean, 8 years they've been
Hmm.
tested quite thoroughly, but there is a higher risk that they'll be broken. So you want to know where they are and what they're doing. And then
Ah.
if, heaven forbid, something is found not to be secure and we need
Hmm.
to substitute in something else, you know where it is. You don't need to generate that bill of materials again. You don't need to uh, go looking through your system again to see where the vulnerabilities were because you've documented all of that and you've set things up to be a little
Right.
more rational.
Correct. Okay. Got it. So these are the certain parameters which we need to consider to make our company quantum secure. Thanks for that. Got it. So I think, yeah, we have talked more on the what are the different steps we can make it secure, and what do you think? Like as you mentioned in the earlier, there are still we are, I think, 5-10 years away from getting that quantum computers ready and the make it in a ideal use case. But still, I want to understand. In the earlier of our conversation, you just mentioned you have not seen any companies which is ideally using quantum computer and saying like that, yeah, we have reached this efficiency using quantum computers. So, as a curious question, I would like to know what are the tasks which can be done very effectively using quantum computers. What are the positive sides of it? We talked about the threats, but what are the positive sides, which is very helpful for
Okay.
as a quantum computer?
So let's see. Quantum computers are quite naturally good at optimization tasks, and there's various
Hmm.
algorithms that people use for those. And that goes back to what you mentioned earlier about processing things in parallel and the fact that they can basically hold every possible state at once and act on every possible state at once. That's not a very precise statement, and practitioners in this field will might think less of me for describing it that way. But if you understand that that's a very sort of a generic, high level way of describing it, there is that. There are quantum algorithms for solving sparse matrices, and they
Hmm.
are of interest to people in finance. And let's
Okay.
see, one big thing that people are really looking to do is quantum chemistry and molecular design,
Quantum
drug design.
chemistry.
Um, in fact, when Richard Feynman sort of proposed the idea of a quantum computer, he said, nature is quantum, and you're not going to be able to
Uh-huh.
simulate nature properly unless you have a computer which is also
Oh,
quantum. And when you're looking at the properties of materials or you're trying to work out what the medicinal properties of certain molecules or proteins, you are dealing with a quantum structure, quantum dominated structure.
okay. 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 So we can say that quantum computer is very helpful for our next level of next stage of medical research or for healthcare domain altogether to do more research on a DNA or RNA level of any new viruses or bacteria coming into the picture or to design a new medicines altogether. So there it will be a very helpful.
I think, yeah, for
It
drug
will be a
design,
very
it would
helpful.
be helpful. There's another algorithm that my old company used to work on was for optimizing database searches. Okay, I guess it's not an optimization
Optimistic.
algorithm, but
Uh-huh.
that was a big one as well.
Okay, nice, nice. Optimization and then doing a complex task, parallel task. These all are the generic and key important use case of quantum computers. Amazing. That's great. That's great. So, would you like to add anything else on the quantum computer side which we missed? Because I don't have much knowledge on the quantum computer side, but just I'm reading more on that. But would love to know or any key points which you want to add from your side.
Oh, let me think. Uh,
Yeah,
One
sure.
thing I probably should mention, um, when
Uh-huh.
that transition from of bringing in post quantum cryptography and updating your
Mm.
systems, that is actually quite an involved task. It's not something you can just sort of do in a
Yeah.
week or a month. Um, Apart from the great planning that needs to go into it, there's also a lot of testing. And as I mentioned earlier, that
Mm.
the computational complexity
Yeah.
of these encryptions is greater, and that can have a
Mm.
deleterious effect on performance. And so when every every encryption is sort of upgraded, you need to test your systems and make sure that they are still performing at an acceptable
Mm.
level. And if they're not, then no, make an upgrade somewhere else, or maybe decide that particular data is not
Mm.
so sensitive just yet, or basically make intelligent choices so that things are not disrupted and you still maintain your performance. So there's a lot of benchmarking and a lot of testing as you go that needs to be done.
Okay, got it. So I got one curious question.
Yeah,
With respect to the current situation, you might have heard the news. Recently, India and Pakistan has a very short mini war kind of situation over there,
yeah.
and they had some conflict, right? So do you feel like once the country has developed these quantum computers, so they might can use this to attack or do the cyber attack sort of thing? So what's your thought in that angle as a
Well, I think
if some government
countries are already attacking each other with cyber attacks.
yeah,
I know in Australia we've
right.
had to fend off a few things that were reported in the
Uh-huh.
news. There's probably others we didn't hear about. Um, and
Uh-huh.
it's that sort of grey area between peace and war where you can't say for sure that they're attacking you, but it looks very suspicious, and so we need to be very alert.
Right.
Uh, so yeah, I have no doubt that warring countries will make use of quantum computers if they have them. Um,
Mm.
Certain countries not are not getting along with the rest of the world particularly well. I have no doubt that they would use a quantum computer
Mm.
for bad things, I guess, if they had the chance. And that's actually another
Uh-huh.
reason that people need to take this post quantum cryptography issue seriously, is because you're not going to
Mm.
know necessarily when
Yeah,
the cryptographically relevant quantum computer becomes available. Uh, they're not going to
correct.
announce it. Hey, we can read your things now. We have our computer now. They'll say, oh, they'll
Right.
develop it, and they'll just use it quietly, and you won't know until you start seeing the effects. There are people in this field who think that it's already happened.
Mm.
The mainstream view
Okay.
is about 10 years, give or take, but there's
Uh-huh.
very wide margin of uncertainty in that. Some people say it's going to be longer, some think it's going to be less than 5, some people think it's already happened.
Okay. 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 So there you secretly so many countries already has that they have reached that state and they're not revealing that state, but they are using for their own internal purpose. We can say like that if that's the statement is correct, if it's already
Some people
happened,
think that.
right?
I don't think so, they're
Okay.
there yet, but it could
Okay.
happen.
Okay. Okay.
Mm.
Amazing, amazing. So, of course, it's a concern point. If some countries are using this for a bad thing, it's literally going to harm a lot of people,
Yeah.
right? Amazing. So yeah. So what's your advice for a new quantum computer enthusiast or developers who want to build something out of it? What's your feedback or advice for them?
Well, there's a future in it. There is a future in it. So learn
Mhm.
quantum information theory, know how to code well,
Uh,
start your networking. Uh, it's a very exciting field. There's a lot of things happening, so you really need to follow
uh,
what's being said and what's going on in the field, so that you're not sort of caught out. There's a lot of uncertainty
right.
as well. I don't really know when things are going to happen or exactly the path things are going to take. I wouldn't be
Hmm.
surprised if some new technology came along and overtook everything that everyone's doing at the moment. Um,
Hmm.
but if you're into it, if it excites you, then be excited because there's a future in it for you if you're willing to do the work.
Okay. Okay. So guys, quantum computer is the future. So let's jump into it. If you have small interest also, just make it big. Because of course, this is the future. We know that. Encryption, this is completely related to the security stuff. So which is a very sensitive and key important stuff for each and everyone, not just for the businesses, but
Mm-hmm.
for country and individuals as well. So it matters a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. So, Michael, thank you for your great information, and you have given a very detailed explanation of most of the things. But I would love to host more podcasts together on a specific use case. Now we can talk more on algorithms in future. Let me read also. I'll also read more into this quantum computer set, and I'll get back to you with the detailed stuff, and we can talk on some use case point of view inside this.
Sounds good.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. So, thank you so much. Bye
Thank
bye.
you. It's a pleasure.